Hi,
Hey, how's it going, Allah?
I'm fine. How are you, Farhan?
Good, good, good. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you. How are you?
Everything's great. It's just a very rainy morning here in Wisconsin, in my city. So uh, it's very cloudy, very rainy, kind of gray outside. So not that fun, but it'll be okay.
Uh, and Here in my country, it's in the evening.
Yeah. Is it like how's the weather? It's probably nice now, right? Because it's at night, so it's getting colder.
Yeah, yeah. It's very good. It's great weather. Um,
Awesome. Yeah, how have you been? I haven't seen you in many weeks.
I'm fine, but your time is different.
Yeah, I know. I actually recently, about 3 weeks ago, I changed my schedule so that I teach twice in the morning U.S. time. Right now here it's 8 o'clock, and I also teach twice at night. So 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. Central Time in the United States, and then 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. Central Time. So 4 hours a day now. But yeah, it's good to see you. We'll get started pretty soon.
Are
So,
you
how's it?
are you
Oh,
tired?
little bit. I mean, I slept a little late yesterday, but I drank a lot of Turkish tea before I went to sleep. So the
Yeah,
Turkish tea is still keeping me up. I don't know. I drank only one pot. Like the pot wasn't that big. I drank the complete pot, and I'm like wired. I'm 100%. My eyes might be, like kind of closing, but my mind is awake, you know. So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's what tea does to you, man. Honestly, like this Turkish stuff, this black tea wakes you up, man.
Yeah.
Like there's no other remedy if you want to stay awake. So
Do you know? Do you know, Farhan? When I drink coffee, I sleep.
really,
Of course, I don't like to drink coffee.
but how do you? I thought most people stay awake when they drink coffee. How do you go to sleep?
I don't know, but if, I don't like to drink because I get I get sleep.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I drink coffee when I need to drive. Like one time I was driving from my city to Ohio. Cleveland is like 13 hours away. So I was driving just through the night. I left my house at 7 p.m. and I reached at Cleveland at 8 a.m. the next morning. But I didn't stop. I only stopped once for gas, but drank one thing of coffee, and at the entire road I was like awake like a crazy man. I was like that. That's what happens when I drink coffee. So that's cool. And do you know the more sugar they put in coffee, like one of my friends, he's from Lebanon. Me and him always hang out, and when we're here, so he told me, and he's absolutely right. The coffee that you get on the street, like in the gas stations in the U.S., I think maybe the same in Kuwait, but the gas station coffee is has the most sugar and is the worst coffee for you. But if you drink that coffee, you cannot go to sleep. Like it's impossible to go to sleep. They put so much sugar in it, you know. You're the
No,
entire drive you're just trying to sugar.
no, I'd like coffee without sugar.
Yeah, I know you guys are talking about the gahwa, right? Or the
It's,
gawa or
it's kahwa.
the
It's
gahwa.
kahwa.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
It's
That's
coffee,
the
not tea.
that's the dark stuff. Gahwa is the dark stuff. You guys are gonna have no sugar in
Yeah,
that. Absolutely.
kahwa, kahwa. Yeah,
Yeah, I've heard of gawa. I've never had it, but
yeah.
I've
Do you
heard about it.
speak my accent?
Little bit يعني مش كويس مش كويس
يعني
شوية شوية.
يعني Good for me. That good.
Yeah.
Because when I speak wrong, you can correct for me.
Of course, absolutely. You don't have to. I am completely at your service. No, don't worry about that. So I'll help you out. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
yeah. Good to see you again, Allah. And let's welcome Soso, our favorite friend from Saudi Arabia. How's it going, Soso?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. Welcome. You changed your picture. I didn't recognize you first. I thought for a second it was somebody else. Okay, interesting. How's everything going? How's the weather like in Jeddah?
It's getting better.
It's getting better. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it's nighttime now. So I was talking when we were talking a little earlier. Allah said that it's really nice outside. Is it the same there?
Yes. It's 5 p.m. So.
Yeah, I think it's nice. Like at night, I think it's nicer in the Middle East because it's not super hot and it's like the sunset, after the sunset, like or right before the sunset when people are walking
Mhm.
outside. It's kind of that nice like cool breeze maybe. And Jeddah is much cooler than like Riyadh anyway, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's next to the water and stuff. Great. No, that's awesome. That's really cool. So guys, there might be problems with Google Hangouts or something. I think that's what's preventing a lot of people from joining on time. So I think it's just going to be us. We'll get started then, and I'll give a brief overview, guys, of the class to begin. So thank you for joining. And today we're going to be talking about two important topics in this class. The first thing we're going to be talking about are comparatives and superlatives, right? That's a fancy way in English of saying that we are going to be talking about how to make words that allow us to compare one thing to another, right? So that's what comparatives are. Comparatives allow us to compare one thing to another, right? Superlatives are when you compare one thing to a lot of different things, right? So we're going to look at the differences between comparatives and superlatives, how we make them, right? And at the same time, and then afterwards, we're going to be looking at an article about Singapore, actually. So it was a very fascinating article. Singapore, kind of like the United States and maybe Canada and Australia, some of these other countries, is a nation of immigrants. You know, there are a lot of people from many different backgrounds that live in Singapore who have contributed to that country's current, you know, uh, society. Like the way they live and the way they interact with each other is really interesting to learn about. So we're going to be learning about that a little bit and looking at some specific examples of people who live there who are living the Singaporean dream. You know, they are very successful. They are not originally from Singapore, but they have made Singapore their home. So before we get started with that, guys, any questions about anything I said? We're okay?
No questions.
Okay, awesome. So I was gonna say, you know, let's think about comparatives and superlatives to begin, right? So when we make comparatives in English, right? Once again, those are what we use, words that we use to describe one thing to just one other thing, right? Uh, for example, I could say, you know, this book is larger than that book, right? Or this house is bigger than that house, right? Bigger, larger, these are both comparatives, comparing one thing to another thing, right? So how do we make comparatives? We make comparatives by focusing on the adjective that we want to use as well as the number of syllables in that adjective, right? It's very important. So let's say I want to say something is bigger, right? So the adjective big has just one syllable, big, right? As a result, I can just add er to the end of big, and I mean I can also add a g. So big and then ger, bigger. That is the comparative for big, right? So for one syllable adjectives, any adjective that has one syllable, big, tall, short, fat, you know, thin, right? Any of these adjectives that have one syllable, we only have to add an ER to the end to make them their comparative form. Sometimes we have to duplicate that last letter. So, for example, for the word big, right? Big is one syllable. We can't write BIGER because it's incorrect spelling. We'd have to just duplicate it. Yeah, go ahead, Allah. Did you want to say something, Allah?
No, no, Farhan, no.
Oh, okay. Sorry, okay. So yeah, for one-syllable adjectives, we add an ER to the end, right? This is the regular case when we want to make a one-syllable adjective into a comparative. Sometimes, in some cases, we have to duplicate the last letter. So the G we have to write twice, right? So let me just write this down quickly. One-syllable adjective, right? Add ER to the end right? Sometimes duplicate last letter. So could you guys give me an example of using a comparative that has one syllable? For example, what I said was, this book is bigger than that book, right? Give me some other examples. Let's start with so-so, if you don't mind, so-so.
Okay. This class is easier than I thought.
This class is easier than I thought. Yeah, fantastic, right? This class is easier than I thought. But there is a little bit of a, you made the right choice, so-so, but is easy one syllable or two syllables?
It's 2 and ends in Y.
It ends in Y, yeah. So we're gonna get to that in a little bit. What about a one-syllable adjective that you can make? So we looked at examples like big, short, fat, tall, sweet, yeah, thin, large, right? Any of these examples you can use. Let's make one more sentence.
Okay. She is nicer than her sister.
Fantastic. She is nicer than her sister, right? And it's a special case, right, when you said nicer, because how do you spell nicer? So if you don't mind adding it or writing that in the chat box, yeah. Yeah, fantastic, right? So nicer, because nice already ends in E, we can just add an R to the end, right? Same thing for a word like larger, right? It ends in E, so we can just add an R to the end to make it a comparative. Fantastic. Looks like Allah left, so we'll go right to the next category, which was if it's a. So actually, before I do that, right, there are two irregular cases, right, where we have one-syllable adjectives that have irregular forms of comparatives, right? The first one is good. What is a comparative for good again?
Best is the superlative, right? Better.
Yeah, fantastic. So for good, the comparative is better, right? And remember, the reason why the comparative is better is because when you think about the definition of a comparative, right, just comparing one thing to another thing. So this is better than that thing, right? Best is a superlative because you're saying, for example, he is the best person in the class, something like that. You're comparing one thing to multiple things, yeah. Telephone, okay, no, that's fine. No problems. Hey, Allah, welcome back. Could you give us a sentence using a one-syllable adjective? Make a comparative with a one-syllable adjective.
Can I say my country bigger than this country?
Yeah, absolutely. My country is bigger than this country. Yeah. Right. So bigger works really well.
Mr. Farhan, but my question here, I get it this lesson. Maybe when the word is long, give more.
Yeah. So
more difficult, more.
You can use both, right? You can use both ways to say it. It's more common to say something like larger or bigger, for example, right? It's actually better to say it like that. If you are talking about, for example, more is used for when we have a syllable that's longer. So there's actually a special case when we use more, right? If it's just a one-syllable adjective, it's better to just say larger or bigger. My country is larger than this country. My country is bigger than this country, right? More we
Yeah.
use in a different case. Yeah, go ahead.
I can use with the 2 or 3 syllables word. Not
Absolutely.
with yeah.
100%, absolutely, right? That's the perfect, right?
Yeah.
That's the right answer because when we have a 2 or more syllable adjective that doesn't end in Y, we use more, right? And we're going to look at an example of that in just a little bit. So the one thing I wanted to mention when you guys were gone was Soso was saying that the comparative for good is better. So there are some irregular cases with these one syllables, right? Good becomes better, and what does bad become? Ken, what does bad become?
Worse.
Exactly, right? So bad becomes worse. You can't say in regular English or in proper English, you can't say this is better than that. No, this is worse than that. So worse and better are two irregular forms. So now, guys, we saw one-syllable adjectives. Let's quickly jump to a two-syllable adjective that ends in Y. Okay, a two-syllable adjective that ends in Y. To make the comparative, we remove the Y and we add an IER, right? So two-syllable adjective that ends in Y, we remove the Y and add an IER to the end of the sentence, right? So what's an example of this? Ken, would you mind making a sentence with this and giving us an example of an adjective?
Nicer. Nicer.
Nicer is
One
actually
syllable.
still one syllable, right? Because nice is one syllable, yeah,
Mm.
unfortunately. And it has to end in a Y also, remember, Ken?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Ten dear warrior.
What about these three, Ken?
Yeah, sorry. Prettier.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Prettier, fantastic, right? So what's a sentence you can make with prettier?
This dog is prettier than that dog.
Sure, fantastic. This dog is prettier than that dog, right? And when we make it, we remove that Y and we add an IER, so it looks like that. Prettier, right? Good job with that. Hey, Allah, why don't you give us an example of another two-syllable adjective that ends in Y? Allah, are you there? Allah, I think you're muted if you wanted to mention something, but if you can hear me. Let's see. All right. I guess we're having technical difficulties. So Ken, I guess, so we can say prettier. What would be the example for dirty?
Dirty. This towel is dirtier than that towel.
Fantastic, fantastic. And for something like happy, it would just be happier, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am happier than other people. I don't know, something like that. Or no, actually, we can't say other people. I have to say I am happier than, for example, he is, or I'm happier than John, or I'm happier than James. Because comparative, we're only comparing one thing to another thing, right? So that's good. Allah, are you there by any chance, man? Can you hear us, or is it just me?
Yes.
Hey, Allah.
Mr. Farhan, I hear you.
Awesome, great. Could you give us an example of a sentence using a two-syllable adjective that ends in Y?
I think noisy, noiser.
Noisy, right? Noisy becomes noisier. Yeah, absolutely.
Noisier.
What's a sentence maybe with noisier?
Yes. My street is noisier than next street.
Great, awesome, noisier. So that's a good example, right? Sometimes we use these words that are really good examples. I would have never thought of noisier, honestly, but it's a great example. So then, guys, let's move on very quickly. We don't have that much time, but I want to just move on to two-syllable adjectives that don't end in Y, right? This is where we use more, guys. So this is what you were saying, Allah, before. A two or more syllable adjective that does not end in Y, right? 2 or more syllable adjectives. So 3 syllables, 4 syllables, 5 syllables. That doesn't end in Y. We just put more before the adjective, right? Just add more before. So what's an example of something like this, Hala?
For example, more difficult.
Fantastic, fantastic, right? Difficult has 3 syllables, and it also has, it does not end in Y, so we can say more difficult, right? Ken, what about you?
Mhm. More beautiful.
More beautiful, fantastic, more beautiful. Other examples could be more, I guess, more pleasant, right? Pleasant is 2 syllables. More pleasant, more interesting, more exciting, right? Any of these types of adjectives, right? And so, any questions?
Expensive.
More expensive, yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Any other questions, guys, about these comparatives? I'm going to jump to superlatives if we don't have any questions. We're okay? No questions?
No.
No.
Okay. All right, great. Just wanted to make sure. So now if we look at superlatives, guys, remember superlatives are comparing one thing to many things, right? So we can say to, for example, in the case of a one syllable, right, similar to what we saw with the comparatives, in a one syllable adjective, we add an est to the end, and sometimes we duplicate the last letter. So big becomes, Ken, what would big become?
The biggest.
The biggest, right? Absolutely. And I made a mistake, Ken, that you caught. Fantastic. We have to also put the before the adjective.
Biggest.
Yeah, but we have to put a the before, right? So the biggest car, or he is the most famous person. He is the, or I'm sorry, not most famous. That's another example. He is the richest person, right? He is the whatever, right? So we have to put a the in front of the word as well. So 2 or more, I'm sorry, 1 syllable superlative, we have to just add, or the plus the adjective plus, or the plus the adjective ending in est, right? Sometimes we have to duplicate the last letter, right? So the biggest, right? Fantastic. So welcome back. Do you mind giving us an example of a superlative that's 1 syllable? A sentence with one?
Greatest.
Greatest? Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely, right? What's a sentence you could make with the greatest?
Okay. Girls' Generation are the greatest band in the world.
There's a naturally what? I'm sorry, so just the last
No,
part?
no. I said Girls' Generation are the greatest band in the world.
Ah, fantastic, fantastic. Their generation is the greatest, right? So yeah, we can use that very effectively, right? And good. One syllable, adjective that ends in est, right? Fantastic. And Ken, another example from you, please, with one of these one-syllable adjectives.
One syllable adjective.
Yeah, one-syllable adjective, make it a superlative, right?
Okay. Coringo is the best online school.
Colingo is the best online school, right? Great. So that's an example of an irregular, right? So good becomes best, right? We can't say goodest, for example. So good job. Good for catching that, right? So my bad. I did not. My ears are nuts today. Girls' Generation are the greatest band in the world. I apologize. I had no idea what Girls' Generation is, so maybe that's why I heard their generation. Because I said, "What's Girls' Generation?" Okay, makes sense. Is it a band that you listen to often?
Yeah. Ken knows them, by the way. He knows them.
Are they? What are they? Like, where are they
Korean.
from? Oh, they're Korean. Okay. Oh, I see. My sister must know them then because she loves all that music, all that kind of music. So, cool. Very cool. So, Girls' Generation, the greatest band in the world. So, what's in it? What's the superlative for bad?
Worst.
Worst, yeah, absolutely, right? Bad becomes worst, right? So that's the one example we have here. So, hey, Allah, welcome back, man. Something's happening with us, man. We keep getting disconnected. Um,
Thank you. Thank you,
yeah.
but my internet making me crazy.
Oh, no problems, no problems. Could you give us an example, Allah, if you don't mind, if you can remember, what the a one-syllable superlative?
Yeah, can I say uh, the Al Arab building is the highest building in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. The highest building in the world, the tallest building in the world, right? Those would all be in this category. One syllable, high and tall, right? Is it called Burj Arab, Burj Al Arab, or Burj Khalifa? What's the name of that?
Burj Khalifa.
Burj
Khalifa, yeah.
Khalifa, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
a interesting building. I think they wanted to call it Burj Dubai, and then they called it Burj Khalifa, and they changed it around and stuff. So, uh,
العرب كمان العرب building.
yeah. And then Saudi wants to make the tallest one now too. The one in the Haram is like super tall, right? Have you guys seen a picture of
Yeah.
the Abraj al Bayt or whatever it's called? That thing is crazy. Have you seen that, So? Maybe did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, the Abraj al Bayt,
Very
like
tall.
I saw the Hajj photos, right? And that thing is so tall, it overshadows the entire Haram. Like, it's like now people don't look at the Kaaba, they look at Abraj al Bayt. You know, like I mean, it removed the focus from the Kaaba.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I thought I was like, is this the end of times? You know, like you know how
It's like, you know, with all the buildings and the hotels, it's like you're going into a mall.
yeah, you're giving it's like a commercial thing almost, right? I think it's like we're taking away the tradition of that area. But anyway, whatever. We'll get to that later. So okay, guys. So one syllable becomes worst, right? Or bad becomes worst. What about if it's a two-syllable adjective that ends in y? What do we do? Right? Ken, do you remember what we do with the two-syllable adjective that ends in y?
That is why, east.
Yeah, right. So we remove that y and we add an est or an iest to the end, right? So if it's a two-syllable adjective that ends in y, then we have to. Oh, we still have to have the before the adjective, right, Ken?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
then we have
the
or the exactly. I always have that confusion because of the pronunciation difference. So the and then the adjective, but except this time ending in iest, right? So Ken, what's an example?
I'm the happiest man.
Yeah, absolutely right. I'm the happiest man in the world, right? In the world, yeah, absolutely. Why not, right? You have to compete with me because my name means happy, but you can still be the happiest person in the world. What about Allah? What's another example?
Farhan, when the word has two syllable or three syllable, the biggest is most or the
Yeah, the superlative is most, right? Also,
most.
Allah, there's some echo, man. I don't know. Can you hear the voice, like my voice? I can hear myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because when my hand, it's not charged.
Oh, okay. Don't worry about it, man. Don't worry about it.
Just a minute,
Okay, no problem.
and my
Sorry
daughter
about
is
that. Yeah.
woke up.
Okay. But yeah, so I'll just go on here this way. But if it's two or more syllables, right, then we use most, right? But if it's one syllable, I'm sorry, but if it's two syllables that ends in a y, then we have to replace with iest, right? So if it's two or more syllables and doesn't end in y, then we put most, right? Most beautiful, most exciting, most I don't know. What's another one, guys? Most famous, right? Most famous, for example. But if it's two syllable that ends in y, then we replace it with iest. So what's an example of that then, Allah? Two syllables but ends in y. So Ken said happy becomes happiest. What about another one? Like let's say dirty. What would dirty become? Allah. Dirty. I think maybe Allah's trying to get a headphone. So, do you want to give me?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Allah. I'm sorry. Dirty becomes.
yeah, but excuse me, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to know what dirty would become. The word dirty, it's 2 syllables, ends in Y. So what would be the superlative form of that?
Dirty?
Yeah. Remember, we remove the
I
Y.
don't.
We remove the Y
Yeah,
and we add
dirtiest.
IEST, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
dirtiest.
Dirtiest, right? So yeah, so the dirtiest, right? The dirtiest person in the house,
Dirtiest.
right? He never cleans his clothes, whatever. He is the dirtiest person, right? Fantastic. And also so, please. Another one, last example from you, and we'll go to the article. So, are you there? Oh, okay, I think I can hear you.
I'm thinking
Uh-huh.
funniest.
Funniest? Yeah, sure, why not, right? He's the funniest guy on TV, right? Something like that. People say a lot of those things. He's the funniest person on television or on, in the world, whatever, things like that, right? So, and then last but not least, guys, we were having so many technical difficulties. I'm gonna just talk about this last one. If it's 2 or more syllables and does not end in Y, then we put the most at the beginning, right? So, for example, beautiful. She is the most beautiful woman in the world, right? She is the most. This is the most expensive diamond ring in the world, right? The most, and then the adjective. If that has 2 or more syllables and does not end in Y, right? So, any questions, guys, about this article or about not about the article? I'm sorry, about the grammar so far. I think we're okay.
Okay.
Okay, good. So let's take a look, guys, then at the article. So Ken, I'm glad you joined because I wanted someone who was
Mhm.
also geographically from Asia
Mhm.
to offer some perspective. We're going to be talking about Singapore actually today, and we're going to talk about the Singaporean dream actually. It's a country that I think has a lot of amazing good things about of Singapore. It's a small nation that has become very successful, right? So let's take a look at this article, and then we're going to discuss the many ways Singapore has become really a place for immigrants all over Asia and all over the world. So let's take a look at the article. I'm going to screen share as well so we have it. So Working Lives Singapore, right? This is kind of like a special edition BBC article, and I really like it. So we're going to look at 5 different people in Singapore in 5 different professions. There's an engineer, there's a lecturer, there's an expat. What's an expat? Ken, can you tell us what an expat is if you know?
Expert.
Uh-huh.
I know export, but the export.
An expat, this is actually an abbreviation, so they're being tricky, right? An expat is an expatriate. An expatriate is somebody who is living outside the country of his citizenship.
I see.
So, for example, if I lived in Saudi Arabia, I would be an expat, right? If I lived in India, I would be an expat because I'm not from India, right? So, expatriate becomes expat. So, essentially a foreigner who lives in a country, right? And then also we'll look at a millionaire and we'll look at a cleaner, right? So 5 different professions. How have they been able to live the Singapore dream in Singapore, right? Singapore has achieved what only a handful of countries have, joining the so-called first world from the developing world. The city-state transformed itself from a British colonial outpost into the country with the 3rd highest average income in the world within a matter of decades. Not only that, it has become an international financial center, attracting expatriates from across the globe. So this is expats. Foreign workers make up 40% of Singapore's labor market. 40%, right? It's a huge number. Exporting consumer electronics has been the driver of growth for Asia since the 1960s, including for Singapore, which has also made the most of one of its few natural advantages, a deep water seaport. For Working Lives, the BBC's Linda Yu has been meeting people around the island. Wang Han, a young Singaporean design engineer, is the type of highly skilled worker that leads international companies to set up plants in such an expensive country. She works on the innovative digital motor that powers hand dryers and vacuum cleaners for the UK company Dyson. The motor is made in Singapore, but the products using it are assembled in Malaysia and sold around the world. That international outlook and the government's promotion of skilled workers also attracts foreigners to Singapore. Fraser MacDonald Hay came to teach young Singaporeans how to integrate design into engineering. He heads a 10-year program between the Glasgow School of Art and Singapore's Institute of Technology. So here we have a professor, a teacher. Here we have a design engineer, right? Both of these people, they're able to follow their own dreams, and they've been able to kind of build their careers in Singapore, right? Chris Gill, another person. So maybe, I don't know if the photos actually correlate. I'm assuming, I actually don't know. I wish they had a caption, but let's say Chris Gill was attracted by the government's promotion of the financial sector and a safe, clean environment to bring up his young family. He is the general manager of a global insurance company's Singapore branch, right? This guy's a financial guy, right? Once again, foreigner, probably from England. This guy also seems he's British. And this lady is probably, maybe her origin is that she might be a Chinese Singaporean. And then property developer Satinder Garcha, this guy's definitely Indian, who according to one survey is Singapore's 46th richest person. So I think the Satinder guy is this guy. He's a property developer, and he's very wealthy, you know. He plays polo each afternoon in the middle of the city, giving him a rather enviable work-life balance, right? So he kind of has a really easy life. And then, but it's not just the rich who have a good standard of living. Office cleaner Liu Siu-gyok works all day on her feet, but goes home to a meal cooked by her Burmese maid. She lives with her extended family, who pay for the domestic help and her flat, right? So in the case of this person, let's see if we can find a picture, if they give us a detailed picture of her here. I'll be interested to just see. Okay, yeah, so this is the lady from the middle, right? So she actually runs her own cleaning business from what we see here, right? And in other countries, like in the United States, if you are a cleaner, it's very rare that you also have a maid at your house, right? But with her case, she has a person that looks over her house and takes care of her family when she's working, right? She has a person from Burma who helps her out, right? So it's kind of crazy, right? We have all of these really people from every part of the social ladder, right? Millionaires all the way down to people that are, you know, working class, but they've been successful in Singapore, right? The influx of foreigners has created social tensions, and the rapid growth of the financial sector has raised some concerns about the future. However, what is clear is that Singapore has grown by being at the leading edge of know-how, giving not just the rich, but most people, a good quality of life, right? So I think there's a lot of value in that, right? There are a lot of these countries in the world today, like I would say a lot of the Middle Eastern countries, like Kuwait and the UAE and Bahrain and, you know, Qatar, they are trying to get from that developing world group into the developed world, and maybe they already have. I think maybe Qatar is already a developed country, but there are still a lot of, you know, issues with some of these societies that don't exist in Singapore. So what do you guys think, actually? Let me jump back to the Google Hangouts, or so you guys can see me. Ken, what's your reaction to this, the fact that Singapore has been able to kind of pull themselves up?
Maybe the foreign workers' labor is cost pretty cheap there. I guess maybe I was wondering, you know, the Singaporean citizens and the foreign workers, you know, salary, standard salary.
So you think there is a difference between the between what we saw or what we see with the or the people that are making a lot of money, you think there's a large gap in how much they make?
Probably because hiring maid here is pretty expensive.
Hmm.
So ordinary people cannot hire maid.
Unless they're making a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's a very good point. But doesn't it surprise you then that they have the ability to make, or they have the ability to, like I would think that even if a maid in Singapore is working as a cleaner or something, right?
Hmm.
I feel like they still make more money than they would in like Japan or in the US. Like they have the ability to kind of choose what they want to do with their money, right? They're not making minimum wage, I think. Like this lady who runs her own cleaning business, the last lady,
Hmm.
I feel like she still has enough money. Like, and there's the gap may not be as large as in the United States, because in the United States you really have a large gap, right? Minimum wage is very low for people who work in like
Hmm.
fast food
Yeah.
restaurants and stuff like that, right? But
Hmm.
maybe Singapore is a little different. I don't know. It's interesting. Let's jump to Allah real quick. We'll be back with another question, Ken. Allah,
Okay.
what do you think about this article? That Singapore was a third world country, became a first world country. People seem to be very happy. What's your reaction, Allah? Oh, I think Allah's gone. I'm sorry, Ken. I didn't even notice. So Ken, I think we
Oh,
can talk. I think we can talk more about this as well. So then,
okay.
uh, I'll start with this. Do you think Singaporean society embraces foreigners? Do they actually accept foreigners? They have that right environment?
Actually, the one of the Apple's or Google's, CEO moved to Singapore
I think
because
they
of the
did, yeah.
tax haven situation. Yeah,
Exactly.
maybe for rich people, maybe it might be good to move to Singapore because they don't have to pay the tax so much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely, right? So it could be a tax haven. People say tax haven, right?
yes.
When it's a fancy kind of place, or when it's
And other things, I've attended class with some Singaporean students who temporarily visit to Japan
uh-huh,
in the summertime.
uh-huh.
So they always talk in English, not only in the classroom, they are even after the class. The
Yeah,
classmates always talking in English. So
among themselves. Uh-huh.
yeah, they are good at English, and maybe a lot of different background people are living there. So they English is almost an official language there. So their English skill is pretty good. That's another factor for people easier to move to Singapore. Tax
Absolutely.
and language.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. And I when I was in university, there were a bunch of Singaporean kids that I knew,
Mm,
and they have some interesting policies. Like if you're a male, Singaporean male, then you cannot leave the country until you do 2 years of military service.
mhm, mm,
Even if it's you want to go to university, right? They don't give you a passport until you do 2 years of military service. So most of my friends, when I was 18, my first year in
mm,
university, they were already 2021, right?
ah,
So because they had to do 2 years of military service, and they were very intelligent people, one of the smartest
mm,
nationalities that I've run across, right? Very dedicated, very hardworking, and yeah, their English was very,
mm,
very, very professional English
mm,
because I think it's that legacy of colonialism once again, right?
mm,
Because it was this British outpost, right? So
mm,
just like Hong Kong was this British kind of island in the
mm,
middle of the or
mm,
near China,
mm,
uh, I think that contributed a lot to their
mm,
success. And you're right, Singapore actually has four main languages, right? So they have
mm,
English, and then Malay because it's right next to Malaysia,
mm,
and then Tamil, which is a South Indian language, and also Mandarin. So
mm,
all four of them are considered official,
mm,
but English is kind of the common denominator.
mm. And plus Singlish.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. And they have
So
Singlish is the Chinese English, right?
kind of mix of these four languages plus English, kind of a
Oh,
bit pigeon-like English.
nice,
Singaporean
nice.
government try to regulate not using Singlish.
Uh-huh.
So the artist from Singapore, the Dick Lee, sing in Singlish. They are to sing in Singlish.
Wow,
They,
that's
they can
awesome.
he can speak fluent English, but when he sings, sometimes he speaks English.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, I think they have it's so here in the United States we have something that we call Spanglish.
Mm,
uh, a mix of Spanish and English,
mm,
because we have so many people who speak Spanish, and it's almost a part of the cultural identity of the language that
mm,
we have
right.
Spanish speakers. Yeah, so Singlish, when you initially wrote it, I thought it meant like Sino-English, like Chinese English. But
Mm,
then I realized, no, it's Singaporean English, Singlish. Okay, that makes sense.
mm,
So, yeah, no, it's really fun. I think it's good to have that. There's a lot of balance there, and the food is great too. I don't know if you tried
mm,
Singaporean food before, but
mm. Yeah. And but that the society is hard, pretty controlled society. There's not
yeah,
so much freedom.
yeah.
So and
You know,
yeah,
go ahead, yeah, go ahead.
no no.
I was gonna
And
say that they sometimes say Singaporean Inc. or Singapore Inc. or because they think of the country
yeah,
as like a company almost.
yeah, I heard exactly the same thing in the podcast show on the radio. Yeah,
Yeah,
one maybe researcher, I don't know, the journalist explained Singapore is more like company than nation.
yeah,
So in the corporate culture, maybe not so many freedom in the corporate culture. So Singapore is like that, he
yeah.
explained.
It
Mm,
honestly, from what I've heard about it, I have some business friends who work there and things like that. I mean, I also read a very interesting book about Singapore's death penalty policy
mm,
for drug traffickers. So they
mm,
have the highest capital punishment rates of any country in
wow.
the world based on their population. So
Mm,
I mean, a small population relatively, but a very
mm,
high capital punishment rate. Uh, they
mm,
have extremely strict rules for drugs. Like if you
mm,
bring mandatory death penalty if you have more than like
mm,
a couple grams of something, or they have measurements, but mandatory
and
death penalty.
and in that radio show, that person explained Singaporean government now trying to, how can I say, to get rid of poor people into the small island or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know whether it is true or not, but it's a radio sh it is said in a radio on the radio show maybe. That
Hmm.
person is not, maybe it's a researcher or journalist or something.
Hmm.
So such kind of thing is scary actually.
Yeah, I think so
Mm.
too, right? They want to maintain this image of a
Or
very,
kind of poor people or kind of mentally challenging people or something like that.
oh, that's
I
messed up.
guess I'm
That's
not
wrong.
sure about that, but it sounds like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really wrong. They shouldn't do that. I mean, this country should be
Mm,
equal for everybody, right? I mean,
mm,
if you're poor or if you have disabilities, you shouldn't be sent to another island or something like that. But
mm,
yeah, it's a fascinating country. It's almost like its identity is so different from the identities of the countries near it, right? It's surrounded by Muslim
mm,
countries. So
mhm,
surrounded by Malaysia, Indonesia is very close by, but they have
mm,
that they have a very hardworking ethic. I think
mm,
they built this financial sector in their government. They
mm,
have a very disciplinarian government, strong emphasis
mm,
on rule of law and military things like that.
mm,
So I think in that sense they actually are doing very well. But you know,
mm,
let's say that you are, does it surprise you then that we've talked about all this stuff,
mhm,
does it surprise you that Singapore continues to attract people, even
mhm,
though they have a corporate mentality and all that kind of stuff?
mm,
Why do you think they
mm,
attract so many people compared to China, Malaysia, Korea, Thailand, Japan? I mean, there's so many other countries too.
mhm. Maybe one main factor is money, financial issue. Maybe people go to Singapore to keep their money for rich people and to get rich for poor people.
Hmm.
maybe the commodity price is different, so or kind of salary, basic salary is different. Even though the minimum salary in Singapore could be a large salary in some other countries. So maybe some of them working in Singapore and they save the money, or some of them they send the money to their parents or brothers and sisters or families.
Hmm.
Maybe that's the reason. These are the reason. And Singapore government, actually urge people to come to Singapore for working. So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe they prepared, Singaporean government prepare for that, so promote for that. I think these are the reason why
Hmm.
many foreigners come come to Singapore for working.
Yeah, so they attract the foreigners, the government
Yeah.
has good programs, and it's a safe country, right?
Hmm. I I don't know exactly, but could be very clean. Yeah, I heard it's a very clean country, and
I heard it's clean, yeah. I heard
yeah,
like you cannot chew gum, you get a fine if you chew
yeah,
gum. There's no graffiti on any
yeah.
of the buildings and things like that. But I think compared to some other Southeast Asian countries, Singapore is very safe. I mean,
I
like
see.
maybe compared to like Thailand,
Mm,
Vietnam, and Malaysia, Indonesia, I think it's
mm,
much safer
mm,
because the police are very vigilant. I mean, the country is vigilant, right? Because
mm,
they realize that their success is kind of other countries are jealous, I think, of their success, right?
mm,
One thing I heard from one of my Singaporean friends
mm,
was he was in the Air Force in Singapore when he was in
mm,
his 2 years military. He said they don't allow Malay Singaporeans to join the Air Force. They're
mm,
very strict about Malay Singaporeans joining the Air Force because really, I mean, this might be part of their discrimination or maybe something that's
mm,
a little bit of an issue in Singapore.
mm, mm,
They really prefer the Chinese Singaporeans
mm,
for a lot of the military positions, for a lot of the government
mm,
positions, right?
mm,
The Malay Singaporeans and also the Singaporeans that are originally from India, from that state in India called Tamil,
mm,
Tamil Nadu, they speak
mm,
Tamil, right? Those Tamil speakers and the Malay speakers are a little bit more. There's a degree of discrimination against those
mm,
people.
mm. I see.
So yeah,
Mm. Maybe because the tension exists, that's why they have to keep I forgot the word, recruit,
yeah.
maybe. So, like South Korea, they have to keep, you know, um, you know, recruit for against North Korea or West German and East German, yeah, former former situation.
There's that
Uh,
rivalry, right? There's that rivalry almost.
mm,
Exactly.
so
I think that's a good
I
reason, yeah.
Yeah. So, in that sense, I was lucky not born on the country who doesn't have recruit.
Yeah,
Uh, I
I agree. I agree. I think it would be
social
difficult.
type, so.
I think it would be difficult living in Singapore if you are from one of those groups that's a little bit marginalized, right? I mean, I
Mm,
think if you're a foreigner, like if you're from Japan, I think Japanese people are very well respected because, you guys have a national identity that is very similar to Singapore, as in, went from an underdeveloped country in the 1800s or whatever, became extremely developed. I mean, huge economy, right? I think Japan and Singapore are kind of in the same bracket. They have the same outlook, right? Both of them are suspicious of China. Both of them are very driven by economy,
mm,
right? But Singapore, because it's so small and it has so many
mm,
people and has so many ethnic groups,
mm,
might be a reason behind some of their internal politics. And I
mm,
mean, I think the very rich people also have
mm,
uh, have a kind of the understanding that Singapore is a tax haven. It's a comfortable place. So
mm,
that's another aspect as well that I think is
mm.
interesting. So
Yeah, I envy their English ability, actually.
yeah,
Most of them can speak very fluent English, so.
I agree, and we're largely, I think the only reason, like, because of that is the case is England decided to just choose that one little place for their port, you know.
Mm,
Just like Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong people, or Hong Kongers, I think is how you say it. Hong Kongers also have really good English. Maybe now it's a little bit worse because 10
mm,
years since the British left, but
mm,
in the past, 1990, before 1997, yeah, I
mm.
mean, it's still,
Yeah,
yeah,
thinking back history, that's a result of the colonization. So it's a
absolutely.
kind of a mixed feeling. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can
right.
feel it.
Colonialism had so many negative aspects, but it also had some positive aspects, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And
Yeah.
I see the exact same situation when I look at India. You know, India was also colonized by England, and that's because we
Mm,
have English speakers. But compared to the rest of the Middle East, for example, we or the Middle East and South Asia, they don't,
mm,
right? So Iran and Turkey and Saudi Arabia and all these other countries, none of them were colonized by England, right?
mm,
Iraq for a little bit was colonized by England. Bahrain
mm,
was also, and I think the
mm,
UAE, just the coast. But Saudi Arabia was not. Yemen, Oman
mm,
was never, right? Syria and Lebanon were colonized by France, so they speak French,
mm, mm.
right? And then
Yeah, the
we,
Vietnam too. Vietnam.
yeah,
Yeah.
Vietnam also was, yeah,
Yeah.
French Indochina, right?
Mm,
So they also speak French. They have a heritage of French, but
mm,
Thailand, Laos, Malaysia,
mm.
Indonesia were not colonized, right? Um,
Indonesia was colonized by
Absolutely, you're
the
right, you're right. By the Dutch, right?
Dutch and Japan too,
And
in a
also by
very short
Japan.
period. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And they also, Indonesia has a lot of, I think, Australian influence in the current day.
Mm,
So they have a lot of, people are learning English, I think, a lot more there. But
mm,
Singapore definitely, I mean, high concentration because the British were directly
mm,
controlling it, you know,
mm,
just like in
mm,
India. Yeah,
I see.
yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I took the Singapore course in the university. That course was interesting. At the beginning, British forced Singaporean people to maybe to be British or something like that, or kind of dialect, kind of they want to British want to get what they want directly, but
Hmm.
it couldn't work. So British government changed their policy to how to control Singapore in direct way.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, most of the leader British government accept to study England, and they after they tend to be the kind of English, I can say pro-English kind of people, and these pro-English type of people, ruled Singapore indirectly. That's what I learned the Singaporean class in my university.
You know, I think they had a very similar approach in Hong Kong also, I think.
I see.
I think it was very because Hong Kong, their leaders were mostly British, like white British people, or
Mm,
very, very anglicized Chinese British people. You
mm,
know, like educated in England, studied law in England, lived in England for 20 years, then went back to Hong Kong, or then went
I
back to
see.
Singapore, right? So they
Mm,
they they created this culture of an extremely anglicized or extremely
mm,
Englishified,
mm,
Britishified person, and they became influenced. You know, and to a smaller extent, maybe they did the same thing in India. Same thing in
mm,
India. All the
mm,
administrators, like Gandhi, he was in
mm,
England for like 10 years. Like he studied
mm,
in England, he studied in South Africa.
mm,
Then he went back and
right.
he became much more,
Mm,
nationalist. But
mm,
initially, these people were all. I mean, in those days, if you wanted to be educated, you went to the mother country, right?
yes.
The best education that anybody in India could get was to go to
Mm,
London and study in London, right?
mm,
In Singapore, probably the same thing. You have to go to London. In Hong Kong, same thing. You have
mm,
to go to London, right?
mm,
In Syria, you'd have to go to Paris, something like that.
I
Because
see.
yeah, so it's interesting, I
Mm,
guess. But well, anyway, Ken, it was a great
mm.
class. Did you have any
Oh,
questions about comparative
oh,
superlatives or any of this stuff? Did you want to talk about anything else?
uh, no, thank you very much. It was very interesting class. Yes,
Awesome.
thank you
Yeah,
very much.
you're welcome, Ken. I have another class starting in an hour if you're free. Otherwise, I'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you very
All
much.
right.
See
Yeah.
you.
Take care,
Bye.
Ken. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Take care.
Hi,
Hey, how's it going, Ella?
I'm fine. How are you, Farhan?
Good, good, good. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you. How are you?
Everything's great. It's just a very rainy morning here in Wisconsin, in my city. So uh, it's very cloudy, very rainy, kind of gray outside. So not that fun, but it'll be okay.
Uh, and here in my country, it's in the evening.
Yeah. Is it like how's the weather? It's probably nice now, right? Because it's at night, so it's getting colder.
Yeah, yeah. It's very good. It's great weather. Wow.
Awesome. Yeah, have you been? I haven't seen you in many weeks.
I'm fine, but your time is different.
Yeah, I know. I actually recently, about 3 weeks ago, I changed my schedule so that I teach twice in the morning U.S. time. Right now here it's 8 o'clock, and I also teach twice at night. So 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. Central Time in the United States, and then 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. Central Time. So 4 hours a day now. But yeah, it's good to see you. We'll get started pretty soon.
Are
So
you
how's it?
are you
Oh,
tired?
little bit. I mean, I actually
Tired.
I slept a little late yesterday, but I drank a lot of Turkish tea before I went to sleep. So the
Yeah.
Turkish tea is still keeping me up. I think I don't know. I drank only one pot. Like the pot wasn't that big. I drank the complete pot, and I'm like wired. I'm 100%. My eyes might be, like kind of closing, but my mind is awake. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's what tea does to you, man. Honestly, like this Turkish stuff. this black tea wakes you up, man. Like there's no other remedy if you want to stay awake. So
Do you know? Do you know, Farhan, when I drink coffee, I sleep.
really,
Of course, I don't like to drink coffee.
but how do you? I thought most people stay awake when they drink coffee. How do you go to sleep?
I don't know, but every, I don't like to drink because I get I get sleep.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I drink coffee when I need to drive. Like one time I was driving from my city to Ohio. Cleveland is like 13 hours away. So I was driving just through the night. I left my house at 7 p.m. and I reached at Cleveland at 8 a.m. the next morning. But I didn't stop. I only stopped once for gas, but drank one thing of coffee, and at the entire road I was like awake like a crazy man. I was like that. That's what happens when I drink coffee. So that's cool. And do you know the more sugar they put in coffee, like one of my friends, he's from Lebanon. Me and him always hang out, and when we're here, so he told me, and he's absolutely right. The coffee that you get on the street, like in the gas stations in the U.S., I think maybe the same in Kuwait, but the gas station coffee has the most sugar and is the worst coffee for you. But if you drink that coffee, you cannot go to sleep. Like it's impossible to go to sleep. They put so much sugar in it, you know. The
No,
entire drive you're
I,
just trying to sugar.
no, I like coffee without sugar.
Yeah, I know. You guys are talking about the gahwa, right? Or the gawa or
It's
gahwa. The
it's
gahwa.
kahwa.
Yeah.
It's
That's
coffee, not tea.
yeah, that's the dark stuff. Gahwa is the dark stuff. You guys are gonna have no sugar in that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.